Hello and welcome to a special edition of The Briefing, bringing you highlights from Monocle Radio's recent reporting trip and pop-up radio studio setup at the World Government Summit in Dubai. I'm Tom Edwards. The WGS took place in early February at the Madinat Jumeirah in Dubai. It's an annual gathering that's become one of the key fixtures on the diplomatic calendar, with attendees including presidents, prime ministers and policymakers from across the globe. This year's edition took place against a backdrop of heightened regional tensions. The arrival of Donald Trump's beautiful armada in Middle Eastern waters, highlighting the US president's renewed threats to strike Iran. Meanwhile, trilateral talks involving the US, Ukraine and Russian officials were also unfolding just up the coast in Abu Dhabi. As well as politicians and leaders at the heart of those happenings, Monocle met other key decision-makers and influential voices across business, economy, culture, design and plenty more besides. In this second of 3 special programmes, we're going to focus on the guests we welcomed on the second day of the 2026 World Government Summit. We start with the brilliant economist and futurist Ian Golden, Professor of Globalisation and Development at the Oxford Martin School, of which he was the founding director.
One of the things about being here in Dubai, in the UAE, but this is true of many Gulf countries and it's certainly true of Asian countries, is that the future looks bright. People are getting wealthier. Children can think that they are going to have jobs in the future, that the society will be doing well. And it's a very different mindset to that which you have in Europe or North America, and even in Africa, where people really despair about the future. The combination of low economic growth or stagnant economic growth, AI threatening jobs, climate change, big risks, and rising nationalism and protectionism make things feel pretty grim for many people, rightly so. And inequality, of course, is very marked as well. Whereas in Asia, growing on average, and this region at 5% a year, with very little population growth, people are getting wealthier. And that's a nice place to be. So what you feel about the future and what you feel about globalization depends very much on where you're looking from. And when you're in Dubai, it looks much more positive than if you're in London or Washington.
Just on the G word, globalisation, look, our daily marquee news programme is called The Globalist. We've nailed our colours to the mast. This is your current fiefdom, Ian. Tell me about where we are. People have said, it's a moment of crisis, or globalisation is over. And we know that populist, nativist voices want to use it as a tool to advance their agenda. You're smiling knowingly. Where is the G word at the moment?
There's many things to be said about this,
I like
which is why I can be a professor of it.
But
the first thing to say is that globalization is alive and well and living in Asia. And it goes back to the point I've just made, because it's doing very well out of integration, out of trade flows, out of investment flows, but also not only the economic opportunities. Globalization is good, it's bad, and it's ugly. It has all these dimensions. You can't take the bad and ugly out of it. You have to manage it. So pandemic is a very good example of the very bad spillovers of more and more people in more crowded places with super spreaders like airports, train stations, and things. We didn't get that sort of thing spreading around the world so quickly in the past, and there'll be more. But it can be stopped. The World Health Organization, which sadly is being very undermined by the current US administration, is an organization designed to stop the spread of pandemics. And it can, I really do believe that we have the technological capabilities to have made COVID-19 the pandemic to end all pandemics. Obviously we didn't, and the risk of pandemic is greater now than in the past. But this is not because of globalization. It's because of the failure to manage it effectively. Globalization has lifted well over 2.5 billion people out of extreme poverty since 1980s. It's obviously had a massively positive impact on China, which has been the biggest beneficiary, but also on India. That's where most poor people were. It has led to extraordinary breakthroughs. Monocle is a good example of it, but there are many, many other ways. It's led to the spread of human rights, ideas like gender diversity and others, which are all part of globalization. And so it's an irony that one of the most globalized things now is the anti-globalization movement. which is also
they're stealing your moves.
Using social media, which is again another aspect of globalization. So it's bound up, and I believe the disconnect lies in the fact that some places have done much better than others. Some people have done much better than others. If you're in the Midwest of the US or the north of England, you have not done well out of globalization on average. You might have lost your jobs to elsewhere, and you haven't got to where the new jobs are, which is in the dynamic cities. That is a problem of national policy. I don't believe we can put the globalization genie back in the bottle. So in a sense, what I fear is that the nationalist, protectionist reaction against globalization, which is let's build higher walls, will make globalization worse. Why? Because there's no wall high enough that's going to keep out the big threats we face in the future. There's no wall high enough that's going to keep out climate change or pandemics, as the Chinese found after trying to build a wall to stop the pandemic and gave up after a year and a half. But what those high walls do keep out is not only the things you need, the vaccines and everything else, the investments, the job that come with that, the technologies that lead to longer, healthier lives, the people, the skills. But most of all, what they keep out is the will to cooperate. And so we get into this fragmented, fractured world, and that just leads to more and more risk and more underbelly, and you get into this vicious circle. More risk means people want to build stronger cocoons, and therefore you cooperate less, and you have more risk. And so I believe the only answer is to reinforce not necessarily institutions we have to now, but reinforce cooperation to manage key risks. And also within our countries is to recognize that globalization has been good for certain groups and not for others. We need to look after the people that are left behind. The pace of change is accelerating. This is the slowest afternoon you'll know for the rest of your life, because there are more and more brains in more places doing things, but that means people are getting left behind more quickly. So that's a thing for national governments. No international government can deal with that, but we've done a very lousy job about redistributing the benefits, partly because one of the aspects of globalization has been a race to the bottom in taxation. The creation of offshore tax islands, the Monacos, the Liechtensteins, Cayman Islands, and others of the world. The race to the bottom means that governments have less resource and are less able to redistribute. And then there's also the dynamic cities have done incredibly well, and housing is unaffordable in them. So there's a lot of things that can be done to manage this more effectively. But one thing that is not going to manage it is build higher walls.
Now, another stellar guest who spoke to me and to Monocle editor-in-chief Andrew Tuck was Antonio Zappula, the CEO of the Thomson Reuters Foundation. Antonio joined us to explain more about his work.
The foundation is the corporate foundation of Thomson Reuters. We call it the Thomson Reuters Foundation. So we mirror, if you want, the business portfolio of the company, but we obviously give a philanthropic spin. And we work with Thomson Reuters, but also with governments around the world, companies around the world, philanthropic institutions around the world. We have three areas of work, or three portfolios. The first one is supporting the resilience of independent media around the world. We work with thousands of journalists and newsrooms around the world, mostly in countries where media freedom is at risk. And then we look at business sustainability models, a lot of work on AI implementation in newsrooms right now, as you can imagine. The second pillar of our work is called Access to Law, and we run the largest pro bono legal network in the world. I'm talking about 100,000 lawyers in the network, and we leverage something like $50 million of pro bono hours every year. And it's the largest pro bono lifeline for civil society and newsrooms that require legal assistance. And the third pillar of our work is called Responsible Business, and we look at company engagement when it comes to workforce, and now responsible AI, which is the latest pillar of our work.
Well, let's pick up on that, because that's the reason you're here in Dubai. You're previewing a report that you're going to be bringing out in the coming weeks. Why are you so concerned to see what the adoption of AI is amongst corporates?
I think it's a story that nobody's really telling, Andrew. And a lot of the conversation is really revolving around, especially LLMs and agentic AI, how these tools are being produced, right? What's in the box? We want to shift the conversation towards how is the box being shifted and passed along the supply chain of companies, because it's already happening. As I speak, 78% of companies worldwide are implementing AI in at least 3 business functions. So this is really touching operations, services, products, privacy, and data of employees and customers and suppliers. So It's a conversation that has to happen. My expectation is that we will have the Rana Plaza moment of AI at some point soon. Companies, insurance companies are already looking at the material risk of insuring companies without really understanding the risk they are taking on. There are AI audits that are coming into the market. And of course, there is the EU AI Act, which touches on a number of elements that have to do with regulations, for example, cybersecurity. So we really want to shift the conversation towards the damage that might be happening already to people, consumers, and the planet by looking at AI implementation.
Just tell me, the people in your report, global, or is it US and Europe, and how do people come to be in the report? Do you ask them for information that they supply, or are you kind of sneaking around trying to see what they're up to?
It's kind of both. So it builds on another product that we have, which is called WDI, which stands for Workforce Disclosure Initiative, which is a voluntary survey that engages companies in disclosing supply chain indicators. So this is a similar model. It's a voluntary survey, it's a voluntary questionnaire. There's 40 questions. Most of them are yes and no answers. And this goes to companies. Companies can decide to disclose as much or as little as they want, and then the data is being published, but it's also given to investors to inform investment decisions. In terms of companies, you were talking about the size and the geography. I mean, the geography is very global. We have scraped data that is already publicly available, but we also have engaged with a number of companies that are working directly with us. This includes Vodafone, Infosys, Toyota, Carrefour. So it's a big global companies that are listed. And as I said, around 5 geographies have been mapped. So it's a very global initiative.
Now, you can give us some more of the detail, but we were just talking before we started taping about how high the numbers are of businesses that are kind of launching on an AI adventure without really many foundational principles agreed, without a strategy in place. Before we talk about what the findings tell us, why do you think that is? Is it because there is this truism of people overestimating the short-term impact of AI and underestimating the profound longer-term impact? Is that one of the reasons why even some big corporates are launching into this without the due consideration?
I think it's a business pressure, right? If you are a CEO, you have to look at AI. And there is this massive pressure that you're going to be losing your business to more nimble and agile startups that are copying your business model. I mean, I'm looking, for example, from a Thomson Reuters perspective, this is a company that has a 175-year history and produces legal software. And now there are nimble AI startups that are producing legal software. So, for example, the company, I don't represent the company, I speak on behalf of the foundation, but I can see how the company is positioning themselves with massive AI investment to continuing staying ahead of the curve. So this is really affecting every single industry. So there is a business imperative and there is a massive rush to really implement AI. And I think it's the approach that even many companies are taking is throw everything up into the wall and see really what sticks, because there is a sense of urgency that if you don't do it, you might lose your business.
Georgia's controversial Prime Minister Irakli Kobakidze was another guest at the Monocle Radio studios, where he shared views on EU integration, corruption and democracy, amongst other subjects. The Prime Minister spoke to me and to Monocle's Gulf correspondent, Inzamam Rashid.
So Georgia's position is very clear. From the very beginning, we supported all the relevant decisions, resolutions, international acts, supporting Ukraine's sovereignty, Ukraine's territorial integrity, and also condemning Russia's military aggression, and it has never changed because we are committed to the international law principles and we are always vocal about that. And we have our own problems. 20% of our territories is occupied by the Russian Federation, and we understand very well what does this mean. We understand the value of peace, what is the effects of the war. So our choice is to be pragmatic, and this approach works.
Well, can I just ask about the engagement with the West, and I guess with Western media in particular? There's a tendency to cast things very black and white, pro-Russia, pro-peace, or pro-Russia, pro-Ukraine. Are you saying that there's actually an advantage for Georgia to take a more nuanced position, to retain ties, to keep talking with Moscow, for example? Is there actually an opportunity for Georgia to leverage that more nuanced position in order to deliver better outcomes, of course, for Ukraine, but also crucially for Georgia and the Georgian people?
Yeah, so in general, we want to have friendly relations with everybody. With regard to Russia, we have no diplomatic relations after the occupation of our two historic regions, so we have a special case. We have our challenges also with the European Union. We had more challenges with the United States under the previous administration, but now the situation has changed a little bit. So there is no tensions anymore during the last couple of months. after the inauguration of the new president in the United States. But we have challenges, special challenges with the European Union, which has no solid ground, I would say. There is very limited communication, despite the fact that officially Georgia is the candidate country for the EU accession. So we cannot understand. Of course, we understand what are the reasons behind. Unfortunately, these reasons are not positive, let's say. But we are committed to our goal to become the full-fledged member of the European Union. And we are hopeful that, especially after the end of the war in Ukraine, the attitudes will change and it will positively affect the relationships between the EU and Georgia.
You must be frustrated by the fact that you still have this very fraught relationship with Europe and you're trying to get into the EU, but it's being blocked.
Yeah, so we are disappointed. Because if you look, for example, at all international rankings, indexes, which are provided by non-biased, reputable international organizations, Georgia is the best among all candidate countries. With regard to the low level of corruption, we are doing better than all candidate countries, and we are doing better than 8-9 European Union member countries, even now. But the public statements are not in line with this achievement. It's the same with the level of democracy, human rights, political pluralism, media pluralism. If you look, for example, at Georgia and then Moldova and Ukraine, there is a huge discrepancy and there is a huge difference because we are much more ahead, so we are much more successful with regard to, again, democracy, human rights, rule of law, but also low level of corruption, the liberal economic policies, successful economic policies. During the last 5 years, for example, we managed to increase the difference between the Georgian and Moldovan GDPs by around 12 billion USD. Our GDP is even now around 37 billion.
It was a veritable parade of presidents and prime ministers at our studio on day 2. Next to take to the mics was Her Excellency President Osmani of Kosovo. Inzi and I, once again, were asking the questions.
Most of our diplomatic engagement is within the European continent. And, it would take so much time for us to visit every single country bilaterally in every continent. But when you get to forums like this, everyone is here and there's enormous opportunity, not just diplomatically speaking, but there's enormous economic opportunity with countries that we've never spoken before. But then we sit down and we find so much in common, so many interests in common. And this opens way to joint cooperation agreements, whether in trade or in the ICT sector, in AI, to education, tourism, and so much more. So it's a place where in an hour you can meet 4 presidents. And that's a lot. It's immense, and the results are always strikingly positive for a nation like Kosovo. So for us, it's been very, very fruitful so far. And it's always like that whenever we come to the UAE, which is a country that has always been so supportive to Kosovo. Since 1999, when we underwent genocidal war, the UAE supported us to rebuild our country from the ashes. And now they support us in the health sector and so many other sectors. So we're so grateful that we've been included in this summit, and it's an enormous opportunity to strengthen existing relations, but also create new alliances and new relations with other friends around the world.
On that kind of point of conversation, yes, business is something you talk a lot about here, but diplomacy will be one element as well. What kind of conversations are you having with your counterparts from around the world, especially on a day like today, where US-Kosovan conversations are reigniting, it seems, and taking further steps forward after what's been a pretty fraught relationship? Can you talk us through those steps?
Now, of course, the relationship that we have with the United States of America has always been existential. As you know, the U.S. led the world to come to our rescue, to save our lives, and to give us an opportunity to live in freedom, independence, and to enjoy the democracy that we have today. But Kosovo, in turn, has turned into one of the biggest success stories of U.S. foreign policy in modern history, and not just the U.S., but NATO in general, because there's been other countries that contributed, like the UK and many members of the European Union and like-minded like-minded democracies. But at this time, obviously, we are working very strongly with the Trump administration to see how we can expand this relationship beyond diplomacy and beyond the usual political ideas and engagements that we've had in the past. So we're very much focused right now on two main sectors. The first one is defense. We have an enormous support from the United States in the area of defense. And as you know, we are living in a very fragile continent, let alone our region, which is even more fragile in terms of security. So it's very important that we have the necessary defense capabilities.
Can I ask what kind of defense capabilities and conversations are you having with the US?
So we get a lot of support when it comes to weapons, defense weapons that is, but at the same time we get a lot of trainings in the United States of America to make sure that our army further develops entirely in line with NATO standards. And training is crucial, but at the same time defense weapons are crucial, and what we work in Kosovo is to make sure that the soldier behind the weapon is also well motivated and supported, so that there's not just recruitment but also retainment within our army. The second aspect is economy. We're working a lot with the US to expand our economic relationship. In the past it was mostly aid. Now there's enormous potential to see how we in Kosovo, as a country that might be seen as small, but because of the free trade agreements, we have free access to hundreds of millions of Europeans. So today, when you invest in Kosovo, you're investing in hundreds of millions of Europeans, not just in Kosovo per se, but with the cheapest labor price and with much cheaper prices overall, with an excellent legal and financial system, and the most pro-American country on earth. So I think we fulfill all of the conditions to be seen as quite a desired destination for U.S. businesses. And so we're working on that. So the relationship is expanding. Of course, our alignment continues to lie with the Euro-Atlantic alliance. For us, there's never been a gray zone there. There's never been a question. We're also 100% aligned with the EU foreign and security policy, whether in sanctions against Russia or other issues, because we believe that, especially in difficult moments, what you stand for and where you stand is what truly matters.
Fascinating insights there. And there were plenty more of those on the way when I chatted to the Prime Minister of Latvia, Evika Zilina.
There are different meetings and different discussions, and I'm very grateful for UAE that they are hosting today, actually starting the peace negotiations again with Ukraine, Russia and the United States. I see Europe actually as well need to take a more active part. We as Nordic Baltic countries and Poland, we are very active and supporting Ukraine, and therefore, sure, I'm using this platform as well to discuss, to understand how the possible peace is seen from Gulf countries side. I just had a meeting with President of UAE. We had a very fruitful meeting and very deep discussions about how we can get the peace in Ukraine. And I think Europe really needs to have negotiations, because we need to isolate Russia from financial income to boost their military, but we need to find a way how we can understand what's going on in Putin's head.
Well, yes, not an easy task at the best of times. Talk to me about how you're seeking to leverage Latvia's positions, Latvia's strengths. We think of, it's the biggest Baltic capital. It's got so many soft power assets as well as some hard power ones. As the sort of the grown-up sibling, if you like, amongst your sort of Baltic colleagues, what ways can you go about leveraging soft power, hard power, diplomatic power? What does that process look like?
It's a very sensitive issue because our society is very demanding to have a just peace in Ukraine. And we really understand how hybrid attacks, cyber attacks, sabotages on our country are trying to twist the politics and mindset of our people. But we as well understand it's important for Ukrainians to have peace. So I think for me as a leader, it will be not an easy task as well to talk with my society, to talk with European people, that if Ukrainians are ready for peace, we need to be besides them, next to them, to be their back. But they're the first ones who will say when the peace is really the peace or there is a ceasefire. So therefore, for us, we have been boosting up our resilience. You know that we are spending 5% of our GDP for our military. We have a really strong NATO Stratcom Center for hybrid attacks in our country, so we know those threats. But This time is very challenging, and it asks from us a strong leadership. And I think we as the leaders as well need to use this opportunity to show our society that we are there for them. Because I think too often we discuss in Europe that we need to discuss more, but we need to make decisions as well. And I believe we are able to make decisions.
Well, just on that point, how does Europe do a better job at broadcasting those values, pushing that agenda, reassuring the world that it remains a group of countries that are like-minded, that share these foundational values, the rule of law, robust structure? I sometimes feel like Europe doesn't do a good enough job at articulating that message. I think there are countries that do. I think Latvia certainly does. What does Europe need to do better to take that message globally, do you think?
I think we need to have these good relationships like we have with Nordic Baltic, not just Baltic countries, because maybe if it's seen like they have no other chance just to step up. But if we are together with Nordic Baltic, Poland, Germany, UK, then we are much stronger voice. And if we share the same values, like for Greenland, we were all united. I think we all were united. And with recent agreements with Mercosur, with India, Europe can really stand up. Sometimes we really need to coordinate our decisions. And in a recent time, we have found a way how we can decide who are willing to decide, excluding maybe sometimes those who are not willing to decide, because it has been a pretty long obstacle to all the Europeans to go forward. So not just go forward in security, but go forward economically as well, to share the same values as you mentioned, because we need strong economic Europe as well. People really want to live good life of quality with international rules and sharing human rights. But as well, we need to understand that the world is changing. And in this World Government Summit, we are here really experiencing that technologies are taking a much bigger place in our lives. So we need to cope up with this new reality. So therefore, sometimes for Europe, we sometimes are trying to predict how the technologies will go forward, and we are trying to regulate it. I think for us, we need to give more flexibility to get the reality live their own life, but we need to cope up with that as well.
And wrapping up our parade of global leaders on day 2 was Serbia's Prime Minister, who chatted to me and to Enzimam Rashid.
Drilling down into the regional aspect as a result of the ongoing crisis between Russia and Ukraine, we've seen and we've had in the studio as well, the Kosovan president has been here. How much of an issue is that right now between Serbia and Kosovo, and particularly in relation to the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine? That's also adding a lot of pressure to those ties between the two countries.
I mean, just one explanation, we do not consider Kosovo as the country. So this is the autonomous region of Serbia, and according to the constitution of Serbia, Kosovo and Metohija are the part of the sovereign Serbia. So in the international relations, Kosovo is not accepted to the United Nations or any international organization that is reflecting the critical feeling of the international community. So this is something very important to know, because if we allow that things like the, let's say, the Kosovo-Metohija issue can be spread through the world, then we should have splitting the countries into the small ones, and this is not a functional international position for the surviving in the big movements, in the big clashes, in the big economic situations as we have nowadays, because splitting economies into small and small and small is not giving a progression to that economy per se.
So then if Russia comes out on top against Ukraine and there isn't necessarily peace in the region, do you feel that gives you a mandate to step up your actions towards Kosovo?
Well, we are not planning to make any actions, any aggressions, any military actions or whatever. We are just want to have the integration of Kosovo into the Serbian community, economic, let's say, surrounding, into the everything which is the normal living in our region. So we are not looking forward into the one or the other side in that meaning. We are just keeping our way, and we are looking on the whole territory of Serbia as one. In that meaning, we could not back one on the other side in that relation, and we are not expecting that someone will support us in that way to solve the problem. We have to talk, to negotiate, to discuss about our relations in the region, between countries or between the regions or between the problems that we have nowadays. So I think that the formula is within the talks. We have to talk to everyone and to anyone in a way to achieve the goal, which is stability, peace, and let's say economic prosperity.
A couple of last questions from myself. We've seen the UAE has held trilateral talks. Of course, we've been talking about that. They've held Armenia, Azerbaijan here as well. It seems to be a place to mediate such conflicts. Is that something Serbia would be open to, an open dialogue with Kosovo here in the UAE?
But I think that we are already in talks with the European Union. So we have some negotiations that are already signed and agreed many years ago. In 2013, we agreed on how to solve the problem and how to go on between Serbia and Kosovo. But the side of this non-recognized, let's say, administration in Pristina, in Kosovo, is still neglecting the situation that we have an agreement. So they have to fulfill everything related to the agreement. So they are still and continuously sneaking out from that and trying not to approve the agreement and not to put it into the everyday society life. So this is actually the situation nowadays. So we have the European Union because Serbia is in the way to the accession of the full membership to the European Union, and we are on that way by the fulfilling the requests by the different clusters and chapters. There are 35 chapters that we have to approach to, but this is very much dependent on the political situation and on the economical situation. So nowadays we have some really weird, I can say, situation. We are very well economically approaching the European Union, and we have lots of those things that are already accepted within the Serbian, let's say, law and the assembly. But we do not have the other side, the technical side from the European Union that are always somehow abandoning us with some new requests. So we have disproportions in that way. So we are the country with the closest relation to the European Union among the other West Balkan countries in comparison to Montenegro, to North Macedonia, to Bosnia and Herzegovina, Albania even. So our history and let's say economical connections are much more developed with the European Union in comparison to all the other, let's say, countries, but they are much closer with the political aspect. So we have technical issues and political issues. So we fulfill the technical ones, but the political ones are waiting in Brussels.
Still an issue.
Now for something really completely different. And this is one of the great things about the World Government Summit, the sheer range of people that you get to meet and to converse with. Andrew Tuck and myself welcomed Miles Fisher next, or the AI Tom Cruise, as you may know him. Fisher's a serial entrepreneur and co-founder of Bixby Roasting Company and Metaphysic, amongst others. Let's hear what he had to say.
First off, I am so delighted to be here with Monocle. Truly. Monocle has been one of the highest sources of nutrition in my content diet for over a decade now. So this is a real privilege. The company I just walked away from was one that started with a crazy TikTok, in which we became one of the world leaders in photorealistic synthetic media, which is really a fancy way of saying we created some of the most realistic deepfakes at the time. We don't like the word. It has since changed and augmented, but my whole life, take this with a grain of salt, I've been told, hey, has anybody said you resemble Tom Cruise? And if I'm completely honest, that was a bizarre journey for me. And so this extraordinary technology with my co-founders was able to actually have agency over this bizarre comparison and create fun and elicit joy on social media. That obviously brought attention to this extraordinary technology, the ramifications of ethics, the digital sovereignty of identity. What does all this mean? And so over the last 5 years, we built that into a leading visual effects company. And that was acquired by the biggest VFX Oscar-winning company in the world called DNEG. And it has been a wild journey that in a million years I couldn't make up.
Miles, the minute you meet you do look like Tom Cruise. Not just a bit, you could be Tom Cruise. So people saw this in you and you made this extraordinary business. What do you even hear? Do people think, oh, is that Tom Cruise? Because you're spitting image. You could be brothers. But except you're much taller, I believe, than the gentleman in real life.
I'll take it as a compliment. Of course, I grew up loving Tom Cruise movies with his posters on my walls. It is an interesting thing. Yes, I hear it every day here. And I had to get over, for a very long time, what I heard every day was, I'm sorry, has anybody ever said you resemble someone you'll never amount to? Which is not what they were saying, but is what my ego resentfully heard. Because we're not just talking about any actor. We're talking about the last of the last of the last. And by that, I'm quite specific. Tom Cruise has never, ever been on a single episode of a television show. All the other mega A-list have been the boyfriend on Friends or have dropped into. He's never done it. Tom Cruise has never taken $20 million to be on a whiskey billboard in Japan for 3 months only. Everyone else has. Or started their own brands. The last of the last. He also is one of the most famous faces over the last 40 years. And that was actually quite important because my co-founder, Chris Ume, who really, at the time when we started, was one of 3 or 4 people capable of creating this sophisticated Gen AI technology, was able to use so much public data of Tom Cruise's face to then put it on my performance. Again, all this sounds rather quaint, only over the span of 5 years, where now filters on our social media apps can quickly mimic this. But the conversation that it introduced, and what is identity, and what are these mirrors that AI continue to hold up and reflect to us, it is a rapidly evolving dialogue.
As well as AI, we also found plenty of time to talk about great hospitality. Andrew and I, for this one, warmly welcomed a real gentleman. Rainer Stampfer, President of Global Operations for Four Seasons.
Rainer, we've been through an extraordinary period for hospitality with the resurgence, a return in these post-COVID years, which seems a long time ago now. But every year, the numbers of people wanting to travel, the demand for luxury travel as well, it seems to have ticked up. Is that your take on the market? Is there still a feeling that these are boom times, or is it becoming a little bit more complicated as we see a cut down in spending in some sectors?
I'd be careful with boom times. We've clearly seen strength, and particularly in that upper segment with the so-called luxury consumer. We've had an incredibly strong 2025. The outlook for 26 is very positive. Of course, we're always careful given the volatility in the world, but altogether we certainly are reaffirmed with the interest of individuals wanting to travel, wanting to have richer experiences when they travel. And I know experiences these days it's an almost overused word, creating these special moments, but we see that the interest is there. The willingness to spend on creating these special memories is there. And again, particularly in this high-end market. And I want to believe that we have years to go where that trend is going to continue.
And just tell me, when we look at the world of luxury travel, for a brand like Four Seasons, what's the tension almost between the demand that when people arrive somewhere, they feel it's unique, it's local, it's connected to the place they're staying in, but they're booking probably Four Seasons because they like what you do, and there's certain expectations that they want to feel comfortable with the Four Seasons brand. How do you play those two things off, for example, in a market like here in Dubai?
I think ultimately that's what Four Seasons is about, and that's what our customers tell us why they stay with us. There is that understanding of reliability, safety, knowing there is a Four Seasons, we're being cared for. and though with that angle of providing authenticity, giving them access to a particular market, allowing them perhaps to experience a destination in a way that they by themselves wouldn't be able to, be it for not having the insights, being for not having the access.
Well, this plays into something I wanted to ask you about, and I'm now recalling our conversation here at WGS last year. We spoke really interestingly about personalization, and in particular how technology could help that process. 12 months on, we know how quickly the technology develops. What are your insights now, Rainer? Are they the same as they were about the importance of that more personalized experience for travelers in any market?
This is the time where the industry as a whole, I believe, makes significant steps forward in using technology, in receiving richer insights and more data, where at Four Seasons we've always prided ourselves, and ultimately it's all our team members that take it upon themselves, right? You train them to a certain extent, but then it's upon them to see a guest as the individual, to notice what matters to someone, and to provide that care that somebody should expect when coming to Four Seasons. Do we have more data today? Yes. Do we have better tools available to us? Yes. Are we investing on that front? Absolutely. But always with the understanding that's enablement, and where I believe with AI, with all the technology that's available to us, that ultimately that human touch that creates a sense of belonging, that brings across that care, is of greater importance rather than of lesser.
Yeah, I mean, you can't do a warm welcome. A machine hasn't got that down yet, has it? Not a Four Seasons welcome.
And we clearly see, there are moments, if you arrive at 3 a.m. after a 12-hour flight, you not necessarily want to have a lengthy conversation. But generally, we see that our guests come to us because, to your point, that sense of belonging is created by humans, that touch, enabled with greater capabilities, makes all the difference.
And that brings us to the end of this special edition of The Briefing here on Monocle Radio, featuring highlights from our reporting and studios at the 2026 World Government Summit in Dubai. This programme was produced and edited by Sam Impey. I'm Tom Edwards. Goodbye, and thanks for listening.